So thank you for being here, and I'm very excited to introduce our VP of Product, Brett Carter, who has been working tirelessly to bring Boundless to life, and he'll be giving a keynote and overview to our proving stack.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. All right, let me see if I can figure out how to work this first. Did I do it right, Sasha? Yeah, look at that. All right, cool. How's everybody doing? It's a good turnout, huh? Hey, can we give our events team a quick round of applause? Thank you, Natalia. Thank you, Valerie. This is such a cool place. I haven't been up this high in a long time, and that's not a joke about drugs or anything like that. Okay, cool. Awesome. Hi, everyone. I don't know why I put a photo of myself because you can see me right here, but I'm Brett Carter. Quick background on me. Yeah, I got really interested in crypto late 2014. I'm a little embarrassed to say it was XRP that initially drew me in, but we all make mistakes. Please forgive me. Yeah, I think I got so motivated and so excited about the crypto space and sort of the digital sovereignty and potential freedom that it offered that it motivated me to learn how to code after the 2017 bull market. Just a few other things about myself. Worked as a PM for various SaaS companies and really got ZK pilled working at O1 Labs, the labs code behind Mina protocol in 2021. And met some of the team from RISC Zero back at, I think it was Devcon 2022 in Amsterdam, actually. And just like really loved this new accessible approach to ZK. It felt so powerful. Can't believe how far that we've come since then, and look forward to giving you a couple updates on the progress that we've made. A couple personal things that are just kind of fun. I'm a husband and father of 4, which my favorite joke is like, that means I think I have like the second most kids in all of crypto. And yeah, I really believe in what we're doing here. My hope is that the work that we do to enable financial freedom and digital sovereignty will leave things a little bit better for the next generation. Cool. So let's see. Slides are out of order. All right, I'm gonna skip around a little bit. So really, I want to jump in this idea of this 4 blockchain eras that we've gone through. There's an old A16Z article about these 4 generations or 4 eras of blockchains. This is like a 2018 article, so I've modified it, but I think it still kind of sticks. You can imagine, payments-only chains like Bitcoin. First generation, you get digital money, digital scarcity. Then we had the evolution. 2016 comes Ethereum and programmable money. We also got Turing completeness, so more than just payments. At the time, everything was great. CryptoKitties hadn't arrived yet, right? And so we had highly composable smart contracts. Never thought about a second chain. It just seemed like everything was great. And then the CryptoKitties came and ruined everything. And so we've been trying to make scalable money since then. Primarily, blockchains have been focused on just scaling. I would even call it vertical scaling. Just like, hey, how do we get consensus to go burr? How do we get as many transactions through a blockchain as possible? And we're really beginning to decentralize, or like modularize or break apart the blockchain stack. And so you're seeing things now where you've got even the beacon chain itself, right? The Ethereum L1 is sort of broken into 2 parts, two separate chains. L2s, right? You're getting sort of fragmented execution ecosystems. Celestia focused on DA and the great things that they're doing, espresso systems, ABSs, etc. And while there's a lot of promise in modular blockchains, we've really fragmented the ecosystem. This isn't a surprise to anybody, right? Interoperability today, thanks to L2s, is rough. The DevX in blockchains was quite bad as it was. And so my thesis here that I'm gonna try to propose to you guys is that we're actually headed to a 5th era, not just the blockchains, but blockchains coupled to verifiable protocols. And we'll get into what that means. Cool. Yeah, just like, why do blockchains matter? Let's kind of go back here. Why do blockchains matter? I almost want to raise this question. Why do you guys care about blockchains? The airdrops? Is that what it is? Does anybody like actually care? All right. I think we care about blockchains because they provide this new trust minimized coordination system where anybody connected to the internet can interact with one another without trusting or knowing the person on the other side of those transactions. It's a really powerful cooperation mechanism for humanity. Think about like, when money first came about and the coordination that that enabled. We're really sort of reinventing, this ability to coordinate in a new, meaningful, and powerful way. How do blockchains, and like how do blockchains enable this? I'll propose this concept of verifiability, right? A blockchain's powerful because anybody can, verify the state of the network. You can go all the way back to the beginning and ensure that there's been no double spends. You can ensure that all the transactions were executed correctly. And so this concept of verifiability is really powerful. The definition of verifiability, right? The fact of being true or correct. And so keep in your mind this idea of, traditionally until now, consensus has been our primary mechanism to achieve this characteristic of verifiability. This ability to know that the ledger is true, that execution is true, et cetera. Okay, cool. So, so far the last couple years, the design space for blockchains has looked something like this. You can roughly think of like, this is, slowly these blockchains are basically getting faster, right? And so, Ethereum's prioritizing decentralization, so lower hardware requirements. Solana just wants to go burr, right? Keep the state all in the memory. Sui, on the other hand, is kind of actually somewhere in the middle, but has some tricks on consensus. And so you can see this trade-off space is kind of simple. And you can imagine that, every block has a limit today, right? And this execution limit. So on Ethereum targets 15 million gas, with a max of 30. And in order for Solana to be fast, there's actually, I think, arguably a little bit lower execution limits. It's a little harder sometimes to do things in a given transaction or a given block. And then you have this third parameter of block frequency. And so in Solana you get like 400 millisecond block time, something like that. Sui, it's like 600 milliseconds, and a lovely 12.8 seconds for Ethereum. And so you can imagine that like the combination of these things roughly equals the max, execution or throughput of these blockchains. Yeah, and this presents quite a bottleneck, actually. Consensus is a real bottleneck. And you can see it on this really simple diagram, which is, the network is only as fast as the slowest node. Does that make sense? So if you add new nodes, you add more nodes, you don't get any more execution. You don't get any more throughput. And so really, these sort of design decisions have sort of been exclusively in this design space around what I would describe as vertical scaling. You can basically go bigger machine, figure out how to get census to go faster, and that's sort of it. We've been stuck there for quite a while. Why have we been stuck there? Why is it the case that this is a bottleneck? So Ethereum made a decision, right? And there's sort of two jobs happening in Ethereum node. Today we have a consensus client and an execution client. And so the consensus and execution, they're really coupled. While they're two different clients, they're communicating with one another. And you got to imagine that, when a node is dispersed around the world, not only we need to get, 2/3 honest majority, right? Consensus. And so we need to these nodes both need to network and execute transactions. And so you're really, in a race against the speed of light. And so Sui and some of these really fast blockchains have done a great job of maximizing sort of this transaction throughput, but we're really hitting the bottlenecks and the limitations of consensus because physics is a bitch. Sorry, I probably shouldn't say that, but I didn't sleep last night. Cool. And so we ended up at this compromise. If we want to scale execution, what do? We make a new chain, right? And we've really traded off composability and interoperability to continue to increase execution. So we've got Ethereum, tons of liquidity, a couple satellites. We've got Optimism and Base, roughly close to it, but also not all that interoperable. And we're just sort of adding chains. We're just continue to fragment this liquidity picture, and we're really suffering. It makes it hard to build on chain. It makes it hard to build meaningful real world applications in an environment like this. And so, to get around this limitation, just adding more chains, I don't know. I think we have enough blockchains. Does anybody else agree? I think there's enough blockchains. And so I'll just call this I'll give it a dumb name, the composability bilemma. We're sort of on this spectrum of, do we want composability or do we want throughput? And the good news is this is sort of a false dichotomy. I think I can demonstrate that. We're going to break that with ZK. So how does ZK help in this scenario? How does ZK help solve this problem? Actually, I think this is quite a neat little diagram. This is supposed to say RISC Zero or verifiable execution client, but I didn't fix the typo in time. So you can actually see that like our zkVM, other zkVMs are actually quite similar to the execution client from with Ethereum, except there's a few key differences. So you can see that the execution client in Ethereum has two different kinds of state. It's got like a mempool, some execution state, has some notion of a VM, right? The Ethereum virtual machine. What's interesting here is like the inputs here come from the consensus client, and outputs are basically, you know, like attestations about appropriate execution back to the consensus client. And you can see that the like zkVMs actually have a very similar setup. So we have a notion of user memory. This is actually where you like load a program into the zkVM. We have some system and paging memory where we manage some stuff. And we also have like an instruction set architecture. You can think of this like the VM. In our case, it's you know, RV32IM, this compiler target from the Rust project. And so you can see there's actually quite a few similarities. But there's a really key difference here at the top that I think is easy to miss, which instead of the inputs just sort of being networking, that's what's happening here is additional networking, right? We take programs and an input, and so in this case, it might be like an Ethereum virtual machine bytecode interpreter, and we can load that into memory. And we can actually just run this execution on some inputs, and we're not sending messages out, we're actually sending a proof. And this is really key, because this proof doesn't have to go through the network, right? It doesn't have to do a loop around the world or, you know, go through all the nodes. This proof is inherently verifiable, which is a very, very compelling and so we get verifiability thanks to math and zero-knowledge snarks and starks in this case without consensus. And so again, we can do execution in the RISC Zero zkVM, and we don't require the consensus in that P2P network that's necessary in Ethereum. Okay, but like what kind of execution could you actually move off chain into a client like this? I pulled up two examples and sort of pulled some gas numbers from basic, you know, types of transactions on Ethereum that we would all be familiar with. So if we look at the breakdown of the opcodes in an ERC20 transfer, for example, a bunch of it is actually just S stores, which is just state that you have to store on chain. You got to imagine that while the VM I showed you earlier, the zkVM has memory, you know, when you want to update state for a token balance or something like that, that type of opcode always needs to be processed on chain. And you imagine there's also some log events. You know, you want to sort of let the network know that you did a certain thing. Those need to happen on chain as well. In an ERC20 token, or 20 transfer, excuse me, this particular transaction, about a third, more than a third of the execution is actually just raw compute. It's like multiplication, addition, and we can manage that temporary state. I think it would be called like an M store, I think is the opcode on Ethereum. And like all of the mathematics and additional execution that would happen, I'm just sort of generally calling compute here, we could actually just completely move into zkVM. This is obviously like a very small transaction, 41,000 gas total. And so maybe not the greatest illustration, but you can actually imagine that, you know, that 15,000 gas, if you were able to execute 20 of those off chain, you know, there'd be dramatic savings and dramatic scalability that would occur if you could, you know, sort of move that off chain in a batch. I think this is actually an even more interesting example, though. Uniswap swap is like something that, you know, I think people take for granted. It's one of the primary use cases and things that people do on chain. And you can see that the gas cost here is quite high, almost 300K gas. And in this case, the execution we could move into the zkVM is roughly 2/3 of the total execution. So just like these, and you imagine we could do all of this off chain in a zero-knowledge proof, and then we verify the proof on chain and just do a little bit of, you know, logs and sort of update the memory in the smart contract. And again, imagine that you're doing a Uniswap swap. You're you know, you're a degen. You're doing 10 trades at a time, 100 trades at a time. You know, this is real meaningful savings. 200K gas, I want to say, is about $7 US today. So you imagine you're doing 10, 100 trades. You know, this stuff really starts to add up. You know, when we really start to get this really interesting scaling characteristic that accrues. And so ZK scales, I think a key takeaway here is ZK scales execution via verifiable computation rather than consensus. And so we can kind of think of execution as a split between, you know, this type of execution that we can move off chain and execution that we can't. I think a quick thought that, you know, comes up, and it's a reasonable concern, is, but isn't proving expensive? And just kind of as an update here, I didn't label this well, but when we built Zeth last year, which Zeth was the first Type 1 ZK EVM, you know, I think Polygon spent, you know, 3 years and $650 million in acqui-hires, you know, working on a ZK EVM, and here comes us. We have this general purpose ZK VM. We just put the Rust Ethereum virtual machine implementation into our general purpose one. And in 3 weeks and 2 developers, we had a working ZK EVM inside the VM. So that's the kind of development velocity that you get working in ZK VMs. But anyways, when we did that, we estimated that it would cost to prove Ethereum mainnet $170 million a year on AWS. And so, as the product manager, I lead the product team. I was kind of like, okay, this is cool, guys, but shit, nobody's going to pay for this. It's way too expensive. And so we've been really focused over the last year making things just way faster, just making things go burr. And so we're actually way down now to under $500,000 a year to prove Ethereum mainnet in the ZK VM. That's the type of advancements we've seen, and we have a really cracked team that's been doing an amazing job on that. So in 15 months, execution has gotten 340x cheaper, roughly. I think that's a really nice heuristic. Just to give you some practical examples you can sort of keep in your mind. We sampled 300 blocks on Ethereum. These were Shanghai blocks. And they had about $1,700 in fees. We can generate a zero-knowledge proof of those blocks. This isn't a perfect comparison, but for less than $1. Another example, there's a DeFi partner we haven't quite announced yet. They need to be able to do 400,000 S loads. Imagine they need to be able to read the state of more than 400,000 different smart contracts. And imagine on Ethereum, an S load is about 3,000 gas. So that's 1.2 billion gas. Has anybody here ever filled up a single block? This is 40 full blocks of execution. It just basically wouldn't be possible. I got really lazy on the math and just multiplied it, but gas fees would go up, the base fee would go up. It would get way more expensive than this. This is actually really conservative for that amount of execution. So imagine that would cost, they want to be able to do this, it would cost at least $40,000 in execution on the L1. We can generate a zero-knowledge proof and verify it on the layer 1 for about 22 bucks right now. So does that make sense? It's like ZK execution has gotten radically cheap and radically inexpensive. We're at about, I think consistently, on the Ethereum layer 1 at least, it's pretty easy pickings, 1,000x better. And so I think this might be, okay, cool. So really, what we're talking about here is a new design space, right? We're sort of opening up the design space. So looking at blockchains, ZK has some interesting characteristics. Requires more, if you design a blockchain just around the characteristics of ZK, you need bigger hardware requirements. That's certainly a trade-off, GPUs typically. There is essentially no execution limit. With ZK VMs like ours today, you can run a program in perpetuity. So really, there's no block size limit. There's no limits on constraints or anything like that. You can just keep on proving if you really, really want to. Let's just assume sort of block frequency would be similar. And you could build a blockchain today that would just have these crazy throughput characteristics. But like I said earlier, there's already enough blockchains in the world. And so this wasn't very exciting to us when we were doing research on this earlier this year. And so what we realized is that we could actually take these characteristics of ZK and empower every existing blockchain with them. And so really imagine that, instead of building a chain separate that was sort of ZK native, what if we gave Ethereum and Solana and other blockchains the power of ZK, unlimited execution, and unlimited max throughput? And how would we do that? So you can see what would happen here if we could do that is you combine the power of ZK with these chains, and all of a sudden, as the node count goes up, as one of these ZK nodes joins a network, contributes to the throughput, all of a sudden you can actually scale throughput on these chains that we know and love. And so, but how do you make that work in practice? We're building a protocol called Boundless to do exactly that. So Boundless enables every blockchain to access the power of ZK. And let me tell you a little bit about what Boundless is. Boundless is 2 separate things. It's a set of standards for ZK execution clients, requesting proofs, matching proofs, aggregating proofs, settling proofs. And actually, I didn't write it here, but a little bit of alpha, and for incentivizing provers. And it's also an off-chain network of massively parallelized ZK supernodes. We've got some really cool tech that lets you get hundreds of GPUs going, working in parallel, generating execution for chains. And so it's these 2 parts, both a protocol or a set of standards and an off-chain network. We call it the Universal ZK Protocol. It's the first end-to-end protocol for enabling the power of ZK on every chain. Cool. And it turns out that when you crack a protocol like this, when you actually get it to work, you get a few really interesting characteristics. Number 1, you get scaling. We've been talking about that quite a bit. you also get interoperability. It turns out that interoperability is largely an execution problem. If you can prove the consensus of a chain in ZK, that means you can actually make them much more highly interoperable. What's really cool too is if you crack this, you also lay the groundwork for privacy protocols. One of the biggest limitations today is client-side proving, but the next biggest limitation is that zero-knowledge proofs are expensive to verify on chain. So again, if we have a standard for aggregation and a way for proofs to be coordinated and aggregated and settled on chain together, we actually lay a really compelling groundwork or framework for privacy protocols to be built on these blockchains. What can you build with Boundless? You can, did everybody see the Vitalik ZK plus glue thing? Maybe nobody knows what I'm talking about. He wrote an article recently, it's called ZK coprocessors plus glue. And it's basically you can, at this point, because we have verifiable execution in ZK, you can just build tons of stuff with it. You can build all new types of architectures that never existed before. So I wasn't very creative in this, but you could build L1 scaling solutions. I mentioned there's a DeFi project using this on the L1. Privacy solutions, like I mentioned as well, once we have viable client-side proving, those proofs can get aggregated in a system like this. Validity rollups, interoperable DeFi protocols, like the Mendy team is here doing some really cool stuff with our ZKVM. Shout out to you, Barna, I see you. And ZK bridges, L2 interoperability solutions. There's just all sorts of cool new things that you can build with a protocol like this once we've unbounded execution. So where are we at? We've kind of been in stealth, to be honest, about Boundless. I think we just started teasing some things about it. We haven't open sourced or opened up any of the code yet. And so just to give everybody a quick update, I think you'll be surprised at how far along we are in building this protocol. In March, we kicked off a design exploration. We had 3 teams build 3 different prototypes, an L1, an L2, and a smart contract-based solution. And we like this hybrid L2/smart contract solution. And so we kicked off building that in May of this year. We ran our first internal DevNet in July, the protocol working just all exclusively on chain. And then in October, we did a permission testnet. We called it the Collaborative Development Program, where 8 provers, 8 third-party provers, and 8 application developers built and deployed applications within Boundless. Come December, we're going to have our first partially public testnet. We're calling it AppNet, because it'll just be open to application developers in December. We won't be opening it up to provers yet. And then in early Q1 25, we'll be having our first full public testnet for Boundless. These are some of the teams that are working alongside of us, just building amazing and cool stuff. You'll get to hear from a few of them tonight. Hashflow's doing great things. Aragon's doing great things. Mendy's doing great things. There's just all kinds of cool stuff going on. But honestly, this list is partial. There's other teams that are working with us and building great things as well. And so would just love to invite you guys to come build with us and build this future verifiable, scalable new internet. So if you guys we have a new RISC Zero developer Telegram. You guys want to grab the QR code there? I know Box is in there, holding it down, asking questions. I see you, Box. Feel free to join that and hit us up. We'll keep you posted in that group. And would love to talk to you afterwards. Thanks for listening to me, everybody. Appreciate you. Thanks for coming out. What's next? Natalia, do we know? What's the plan? Oh, questions. Yeah, I can take questions. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a graph wherein you said that if you add a ZK EVM node and the Ethereum graph scales back to the Solana and this one.
This one?
So so even if you push the compute off chain and let's say you have 400 millisecond blocks on the ZK EVM, right? But then the proof needs to be settled on the L1 and that takes 13 seconds. And if you go for finality, then obviously the whole shebang. So then how is it scaling the main L1 to a faster speed?
So ZK compresses execution. That's how a layer 2 rollup works. It's like a ZK layer 2 rollup. So it's just purely compressing execution only. And so you will literally have more, like I mentioned, if I go back to this slide here, there will be way more, let's just say, opcodes executed in the ZK VM that will pass through Ethereum than would have ever been possible without a zero-knowledge proof. Does that make sense?
But in the case of, let's say, a Uniswap swap, right?
Yep.
I still have to wait for the finality on the L1 for
Absolutely.
it to actually work.
We're decoupling execution and consensus. The chains still have their own consensus mechanism, time to finality, etc. We just think that those chains are focused on those problems. We don't want to build a new blockchain and try to solve that. We're going to focus on our niche and in our specialty.
So just cost reductions in that case, not scalability in terms of speed. So you can't have faster blocks.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we've been really limited in our thinking about what scalability means, right? This quite literally means more execution. I told you, right? Like these opcodes, we can move all of those off chain. I could show you a transaction trace where we can, in throughput, dramatically scale these blockchains. It's up to the blockchains themselves to scale finality, throughput, block times, etc. Yeah. So this is really kind of a meta protocol that we're building that any chain can access. We can deploy to any chain. That was a good question, thank you. Yeah, different notion of scaling. And actually, I think that's like, we've been thinking of scaling as just like more transactions, faster block times. There's really a third scaling vector, right? Which is just execution. So that's really what we're focused on, is this third scaling vector. Any other questions?
Yeah, maybe it's a dumb question, but assume both of us want to do a certain transaction on the same smart contract.
Yeah.
If I submit the proof to you,
yep.
Does his proof afterwards become invalid because we both want to interact with the same storage?
It's just same thing. We're not focused on transaction ordering. It defaults to however that chain works, right? So if there's a parallel execution environment in a chain like Solana or Sui, it would maybe, if you guys aren't touching the same memory slot, maybe it executes totally fine. On Ethereum, if you guys are trying to process or you're trying to beat him, it defaults to the sequencing of the chain itself. You can think of these like like base sequencing essentially. Are you familiar with the concept of base sequencing? Okay, yeah. Based rollup, check it out on Ethereum Research Forum. We're using the layer 1 as the sequencer. There is no sequencing in Boundless, the protocol. It's an execution-only protocol.
You target RV32. Did you think about targeting RV64? Because EVM's word size is 256-bit, right? And like number crunching, like arithmetics, performing arithmetics for like such big numbers is very efficient in 32 bits because the penalty is like asymptotic, like the smaller your register size gets. Yeah. This translates into like a lot. So like a division operation executed in 32 bits for a 260-bit EVM word is like 1,000 instructions.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking if you had like 64-bit, you could run EVM interpreters faster, maybe.
I thought when you asked that you were a Go programmer, because Go does not compile to RV32IM. Sorry, that was a Go joke, but it's true. It's also true. Yes, yeah, we've thought about it. I guess I'm not the right guy to answer all the questions about the proof system, but we have our own proof system underneath the ZKVM. If you've read the RISC Zero white paper, if you haven't, feel free to Google that. We call it Zero Stark. It's an iteration of the Stark protocol, except we were the first team to start using a really small 31-bit field. So you guys, if you guys know Starkware, I've seen some like Starkware, StarkNet jerseys in here. Great team. Circle Starks are built on the Mersenne 31 prime field today, which is how Circle Starks are going really fast. We started using a 31-bit field called Baby Bear back in 2021. And it actually works quite well with our RV32IM. You get a nice, there's a nice characteristic between the field size and 32 bits. Long story short, yes, we'll have RV64 at some point.
Thank you.
Yeah. One thing I didn't mention too is, we've been doing some really cool client-side proving tests on mobile devices and stuff, and that's becoming a reality here really quickly. So yeah, I know. Carlos likes that. Cool. Any other questions? All right, Natalia, what's next? What's that? Okay, cool. All right, thanks everybody.